depends on WDXE News, on the air since 1951. This is The Legend. 105.3, 95.3, WDXE.
Hey, that's us, and it's time for Stan Pierchoski and Bulletproof Estate Planning.
Good morning, Jeff.
A good hour on Friday mornings.
Yeah, good morning.
How are you, buddy?
A little soggy, but but okay.
Is it still raining as you came in this morning?
It well, it was
Raining.
slightly raining, but it was shortly before I left. It was raining very hard.
Yeah, been an entire week since I saw you last.
It has been,
And you had a busy week, I guess.
we did for reasons. We had a very busy week professionally, but it was even more busy because we have a staff member that's out, had a death in the family, and had to deal with that. And I certainly understand that. But
Yes.
we got there. We got there. We're here.
Graduation week, too.
Oh, there's that going on.
All of that stuff, a lot of stuff going on.
Memorial Day weekend coming up. So yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's the next weekend. But
Yeah, that is coming up, isn't it?
that's not this weekend. It's next weekend, right?
Yeah, that's coming up soon, too.
Yeah.
We're headed to summer.
Yep, we sure are. We're almost there.
We've even seen Teresa and my daughter. They were out last night, come in all excited because they saw lightning bugs.
Well, that's something they can get used to because they're going to see a lot more of them, I suppose.
That's right. Well, we know this is Bulletproof Estate Planning. I actually sent someone to you. They called me yesterday, had a circumstance where their mother was going into assisted living, that kind of thing, and had a house. And I began to ask questions and realized that they were going to self-pay for everything. And I asked her if she'd ever done any, estate planning, anything like that. Anyway, I sent them to you.
Oh, excellent.
So
I was glad to talk to them. As a matter of fact, I was contemplating discussing along those lines a little bit today, but but no, thank you. That we'll see if we can help them out. I'm sure there's something we can do.
And of course,
for
I
them.
told them about the seminar coming up.
Yeah. Okay, and that's what I wanted to mention to on the air this morning. Is the seminar coming up because we get a lot of calls. Actually, we got several of them that were unsure as to when it was and the where and stuff like that. So let me just cover that here. We do have one of our seminars coming up, and it is tomorrow. And it is right here at WLX in the back of the building. There's, their hall. I noticed I was just out back there looking. They were doing a little work on the bathroom floors, and they look wonderful. But they're doing little modifications, but it's not the modifications won't be in the way for the seminar tomorrow.
No.
Yeah. But it's at 10 o'clock tomorrow. The back of the building, if you come in the parking lot, just toward the back of the parking lot, you'll see a set of double doors toward the end of the building. That's the place where we want to be. It's called the Country Cafe, but don't look for a sign because there isn't. That's just what they call it.
Yeah.
And so just come in those back doors. Don't come in the radio station. That happens occasionally, but if you do, your weekend guy kind of funnels them over to the door here. Right. But come in the doors in the back, and I'd put some kind of sign up if I had one. Maybe I ought to make one, put it outside the. You have one of those signs you put up, but it would never withstand any wind. But maybe I can make something a little more sturdy.
That's a good idea.
But it might be a good idea. Something like you guys put up for real estate, corrugated, whatever that coroplast sign, maybe. We'll see.
We need to look into that.
Yeah. And just something that says in parking lot shows that this is the door we want for. So anyway, tomorrow, the 18th at 10 o'clock, we call it Will's Trust in the Nursing Home. And we talk about some of the stuff that we'll talk about today. And my presentation lasts about an hour and 15 minutes. I try so hard to keep it to an hour, but I just can't sometimes. I just have to. Sometimes I'll be talking about something. I look at the girls that come with me, and they'll be giving me certain signs.
They're giving you the eye.
To reel it back in. And so, okay, you're running along, reel it in. You're getting off track.
My wife has given me that look when I've taught Sunday school class before.
And then, of course, my response is always, but this is really important, so I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, there you go.
But anyway, one thing about the seminars is this. We get a lot of great reviews for them because it's a lot of information. It's a lot of good information.
Yes.
And people are that show up. If you come to a estate planning seminar, you obviously have some interest in the subject matter to begin with. Not the kind of thing you just say, gee, dear, let's just go to the seminar coming up. You have some interest. You've been thinking about this on some level. And so when you come, you're going to get a lot of your questions answered. You're going to learn things that you've not heard before. And you're going to learn about a lot of options that exist that you didn't know were there. And that's good news because usually these options are very favorable to folks. They just didn't know they were out there.
Yes.
Like people you're talking about that you mentioned to.
Right.
They may feel like the only option is just private pay.
Right.
it's not the only option. It is a option, but it's not the only option.
Right.
There are rules in place, and not my rules. I don't put them there. 10-care rules that are put in place so that people don't exhaust their wherewithal just for the cost of care. I mean, that's not the way it's not the way the system is designed to work.
Yeah.
It's just it's not talked about.
Yeah.
And it's very misunderstood. And you go on the internet and it's really misunderstood on the internet.
Yeah.
So.
I from listening to her, I realized that they were going to self-pay. That was their plan. And so I mentioned that there were ways to protect their assets, and said, eventually, she said, protect from what? I said, well, eventually TennCare. And she said, well, we have nothing to do with them. And I was like, she doesn't know what's down the road possibly.
Well, let's talk about that. I was going to talk about something along the lines of power of attorney.
Yes.
But if you remind me, we'll hit that later.
Yeah.
But let's just talk about that because I did talk about that on my Sunday night show.
Right.
And I want to just review that. There, when you talk about TennCare is the only entity the state has that pays for long-term care.
Yes.
It is Tennessee's version of Medicaid. Medicaid's the federal act. This is Tennessee's version of that.
Right.
Every state has their version, okay? But Tennessee has theirs, and they have their own set of laws. So you can look at it as like this. Look at this big bubble called Medicaid, the Federal Medicaid Act. Inside this big bubble are 50 smaller bubbles.
Right.
They can run their long-term care program however they want, as long as they stay within the big bubble.
Right.
Okay, so they all have somewhat different rules.
Right.
We have, when you talk about income, we have states that are income cap states. We've got states that are range state. We got maximum and minimum states. I mean, they're all different rules. And so Tennessee has their own, and the governing authority for long-term care, or Medicaid in Tennessee, is TennCare. Now, TennCare has 3 levels of care. They call them choices. They call them choices level 1, level 2, and level 3. Not really rocket science yet. They got these 3 levels. Now, level 1 is what you hear about when you talk about a skilled facility, meaning a nursing home. And that's the highest level of care. Because when you need care, they have these things called ADLs, stands for Activities of Daily Living. And I think there's, 7 or 8 of them. It's like bathing yourself, toileting yourself, feeding yourself, clothing yourself, getting up and be able to move around, administering your own medication. I don't have them all committed, but I think there's 7 or 8 ADLs. And if you need help with like 3 of them, maybe 4, you qualify for a full-skilled nursing facility, or what they call nursing home care.
Yes.
Okay, that's the highest level of care. And the more help you need, the higher the level of care. And the higher the level of care, the higher the cost. I mean, that's what governs the cost, is the level of care. Okay, so that's the nursing home. Now, we have these waiver programs. I'm not going to get into those because they're extremely complicated, but these waiver programs, level 2, we have is the home and community-based level. So that is where assisted living falls into. Now, assisted living is like when you can do most of the ADLs, but maybe you need help with 1 or 2. Now you live in a facility, and you get a reduced level of care because you need a reduced level of care.
Right.
Okay. You qualify for this. Okay.
Yes.
And when you go into any facility, they conduct a PAE, stands for pre-admission evaluation, and that determines the kind of care you need.
Right.
Thus determines the cost. So if you qualify for assisted living but not long-term care, not nursing home, then that's what they'll approve. But if you need enough help that you qualify for nursing home, that's and Tennessee makes that call.
Sure.
The facility does the exam, but they send it off to TennCare, and TennCare makes the calls whether you approve the PAE or not. So, they also have this home and community-based system where they just send you like $1,500 a month or $18,000 a year to buy in-home services. But that's kind of rare that we deal with that. But that's also one of the waiver home and community-based systems. Okay, so. And that's now we're starting to talk about what level 3 is. So we got what's the difference between assisted living and the nursing home, other than what I just said, which is the level of care? Well, the biggest difference is from my world is how it's paid for. Okay, and it's not a lot of difference, but there is some difference. So if we go to a nursing home, you hear me talk about this all the time. If you go into a nursing home, and you say, I've got a lot of money saved up all my life. I've got investment accounts. I got property. I got my home. I got a second home. I got all kind of property that I really want to protect, and so I don't have to liquidate it to pay for my care.
Correct.
You have to qualify for the care. right? Now, let's just zoom forward and say fast forward, you become eligible. Okay, let's see what that looks like. After you go through all this, you modify your assets so that you become eligible. Or if you private pay until there's nothing left, now you're eligible, right?
Right.
So if you become eligible, what happens going forward? Because the bill is like $9,500 a month is the average. Now, if you're private, let's just say private paying. If you're private paying, you're shelling out $9,500 a month. Now, that payment consists of two things. One is all your income. Okay, so let's say you got dad, he's in a nursing home.
Yeah.
He has a certain amount of income. Okay, so his income, all the income, basic rule is all the income goes to the cost of care. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a few things you can take out of it, like your your Medicare insurance and stuff like that, and a $50 personal needs allowance. But let's just stick with the concept that all your income, so all your Social Security, and if you get a pension or something, all your income goes to the cost of care. And the theory there is, if you're not in a nursing home and you get income, you use that money to take care of yourself, right? Feed yourself, put a roof over your head, all the things you need to survive here on planet Earth, right? The necessities.
Right.
Well, if you're in a nursing home, they're providing all that for you, right? And that's the theory why they get all the income, because they are taking care of you.
Right.
So it goes to them. Now, if say your income is about $2,000 a month, that's kind of an average. I know some people, that's all over the place what the average is. It can be more, it can be less. But whatever it is, let's say it's $2,000 a month, so your income goes to them.
Yes.
So you pay the balance if you're private paying, $7,500 out of your resources. Now, that's coming out of your savings account. That's coming out of your people that sell homes to pay, stuff like that.
Right.
And so going forward, that's how you private pay. And now, if you want to become eligible, like I say, you have too much money, so you're not eligible unless we do something with those assets. So let's just suppose we do something with those assets, and you become eligible, because that's, hear me talk about, hey, we got an approval in this week, and that's what we do. We modify the assets to be non-countable,
Yes.
or unavailable for the cost of care, and then we make the person eligible. Then we apply, and a couple months later, we get a letter that says you are now approved for home care.
Yes.
Now, in that letter, it says what is called the patient liability, which is what you pay. Sometimes you'll hear people refer to it as a copay. That's as good a term as any, I guess, but the actual term is patient liability.
Right.
And that's what you have to pay. And that number is your income. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, like let's say it's $2,000 worth of income, and your Medicare insurance is, I don't know, $200. You're allowed to deduct that. If you have any supplements that you buy that are not governmental ones, you're allowed to deduct that so that those can be paid. And then you're allowed to deduct $50 for a personal needs allowance. I often say, God bless them, they will let you have $50 a month to get a haircut, razor blades, and buy some soap.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, but anyway, so you deduct that, and whatever's left over is your income that goes to the cost of care. So let's say it's down, our $2,000 is now down to $1,500. Okay, so that $1,500 goes, and usually those insurances are pretty much deducted by the time you get it anyway. Right. So that $1,500 goes to the care. Now TennCare is going to pay the balance.
Yes.
Okay? I mean,
yes.
There's a difference in rate, but nonetheless, let's say it's $9,500, so there's $8,000 due. Okay.
Yes.
TennCare pays the balance forevermore. Now that you're approved, that's how it works.
Yeah.
Now, contrasted with assisted living, the eligibility requirements on how to become eligible is identical. It is identical.
Okay.
In other words, how much income you have to have, how much resources you're allowed to have, stuff like that. And when you modify resources and when you give stuff away, all those things are identical to nursing home care.
Okay.
The difference is with assisted living, there's something called room and board, okay, which is kind of the rent, I guess, that, when you stay at a facility, you get your own little apartment or room, or I'm not sure what they call them, a unit. They can have a kitchen and that in there, and that.
Sure.
So, and there's a room and board associated with that. And then there's also the services above the room and board, which are called the assisted center living resources, the medical, what they
Yes.
do. So let's say one of the things you need help with is getting your prescription stuff
boils down to whatever level of
administered
care.
to you. Yeah. I mean, the stuff that they do to help take care of you.
Right.
Let's say you have trouble dressing yourself.
Sure.
So that's something they help you with. If you have trouble administering your own medication, that's something they help with.
Sure.
So that's the assisted living services. Okay?
Right.
And that's above and beyond the room and board. Now, in assisted living, because it's a waiver program, TennCare does not pay the room and board. So when somebody comes to me and says they're in assisted living, going to stay there, I usually want to look at their income and see if it's enough to cover the room and board.
Yeah.
Now, the room and board, the federal government caps the amount that you can charge, or what a facility can charge for room and board.
Okay.
It usually changes every January, okay, like everything else. But right now, the maximum a facility can charge for room and board is $2,265.20. How do I know that number?
Wow.
I don't know how I know the number. It just is there.
You dealt with it, you know it.
I actually dealt with it earlier this in a month or so ago. But that's there's a really formal letter they put out every year about that, and they send it to the facilities.
Okay.
So if you're a facility that takes 10 care people and 10 care beds, you're bound to their rules, right?
Right.
So if you say, okay, we'll take 10 care, and the reason facilities do that is pretty much guaranteed payment.
Yeah.
But if you take that, you got to get all the rules that go with it. You can't pick and choose. And what their rules are, we're going to cap, if you're a facility under our waiver program of assisted living, we're going to cap how much you can charge for room and board.
Now, would I be right in assuming that most of them charge the maximum?
You would be exactly right.
Okay. I was just thinking.
Now, I'm not saying they all do. I'm just saying that's usually the case.
Okay.
And I get that. I mean,
Sure.
I get that because it's usually less than what you could normally get on an open market.
Yeah.
So what 10 care will pay is everything above that room and board. All right. Now, let's just suppose, if we're talking $2,265.20, let's just say our income is that $2,000. Well, we're on we are going to have to private pay that $265.20 every month because they won't cover it, or else
Okay.
So the income becomes the difference is the income becomes very important with assisted living that we
Yes.
can make the room and board. Now, they can modify that. This has happened. If somebody has, here's a good example. I had somebody had a very low income. I mean, it was ridiculous. Their Social Security was like $500, and
Oh, wow.
I wanted to look into why it's so low, but I don't know that there's anything I can do about it, even if I discovered why.
Right.
But it was very, very low, and they got a small pension of maybe $200 or $300, and that may have something to do with it. Sometimes you get these government pensions, and your ability to get Social Security is different because they have their own versions of it. But I
Yes.
don't remember that, and I don't remember even looking into it. But it was very low, is what I remember.
Yeah. Interesting.
And we dealt with this. We had like a $900 deficit every month on doing this. So you can go to the facility and discuss it with them, like negotiate and say, listen,
Yes.
Mom's here. She's a good patient. Because she's a good. When they have good patients, they like to keep them.
Yeah.
Okay. And they like to keep them. We have this deficit. Could you waive the cost down to what she can pay for, or
Yes.
could we negotiate something in between so it's not the full deficit, maybe halfway? Because now who's going to be the patient can't pay it because if the patient had that kind of money, they wouldn't have qualified in the first place.
Right.
So now the family, it's going to be a burden on the family to pay, or the
Right.
It's not even a responsibility. It's something they would have to opt to do.
Right.
But if they say, we could pay it, but really we can only pay this much, I have known that to be negotiated. Is my point.
Okay.
But the facility has to be involved in that, and they don't have to. The facility can just stick to their guns and say, no, this is the price, this is what you pay, and that's all there is to it. And some have, but some, are a little more humanitarian and stuff. But again, I want to make it perfectly clear if someone's listening that that deals with a home like that, they do not have to. That is something. It's like when I say negotiation, you're talking about parties sitting down and trying to come up with a solution that helps both of them.
Sure.
And it can be successful and it can be unsuccessful. But
Right.
it's something. It's an option to do. Is maybe negotiate this.
Yes.
So that's the big difference between the two. Is this room and board.
Interesting.
And again, most people have income a little over $2,000. Over $2,000 because we have in Tennessee we have an income cap now. Technically, an income cap right now is $2,835. Okay. Now, technically, what they're saying is if you have $1 more than that of income, you can't qualify for 10 care. Now, that is true, but don't panic. The good news is there's a super simple solution to that, and that is we simply open up another bank account that we make is irrevocable and unassignable, and every dollar over that cap we put into that bank account, and it goes to the nursing home. So, all the income cap states, and there's about 18 or 20 of us, have made the argument, look, it's all going to the cost of care anyway. Why can't we just give it all to the cost in one swoop, And they say, well, because the rules are written that if you're over the income, you're not eligible. However, they modified the rules. It said everything over the income cap, if you put into an instrument where you can't get at it, and it's earmarked for the facility for the cost of care, will allow you to be over the cap. So back to the original principle, whatever your income is, all income is going to go to the cost of care. Right. So if you got $3,000 worth of income, you're over. So now we got to have two bank accounts. One could be your regular one, where we can put the $2,835 into it, and then the other one called a QIT, or a qualified income trust. That's what which is really a bank account. You put the overage in that.
Yes.
Now, whatever's in the QIT must go to the cost of care. That's
Yes.
the only place it can go. You can never cash it out and get it, because remember, TennCare will let you do certain things as long as there's no way you can get at it. Because they're worried if you get approved, then you're going to go take the money out of the account. Now that you're approved,
Right?
And so you can't, but it goes to the cost of care. So, so we can solve the income cap very simply.
Very good.
But if assisted living, if you have if your income is over the room and board, you don't pay all the income to the facility because it's over the room and board.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the big difference between the two. I'm not talking about the difference between the two and the kind of care. I mean, one is a nursing home, and the other one is where you live in these little units and stuff like that. I'm talking about the financial end of assisted living versus nursing home.
What we call assisted living.
Yeah, that's what. Now, here's one of the problems. We do help people plan and get eligible for assisted living all the time, but here's something you've got to keep in mind, and that is 90%, I'm just shooting from the hip, but a very large portion of people that go into care under assisted living graduate to a higher level of care and end up going to the nursing home.
Yeah.
Especially if you got a progressive disease, right? Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, any form of dementia.
Yeah.
Some of those things, they're progressive. I mean, unfortunately, if you get them, you get worse. It just continues on. And so it's not unlikely at all. It happens most of the time that in assisted living, a time will come when you need more care, and now you need nursing home. Now, when that happens during the eligibility process, it is cumbersome to shift gears on that scenario. So, if somebody comes to me and they're like these folks you spoke to, if they come to me and somebody's in assisted living, we like to evaluate where we are medically to some extent. In other words, we like to reach out to the people that do the medical stuff and say, look, what's the probability that their level of care will increase based on whatever their situation is, right?
Right.
Because we want to make sure we don't, because it's like a separate, it's the same application, but it's kind of a separate application. Mm-hmm. So we have to designate certain things that make it go down a different path when they get it.
Sure.
So if it changes midstream, that's a little cumbersome.
Mm-hmm.
If it changes after they've been approved, it's not a big deal. So,
interesting.
And we actually have a case like that going where we're in assisted living, we're qualified, and we're in that that position of negotiating because we were like $900 short.
Yeah.
And a solution to that would be if that person is now eligible for the nursing home, they're going to pay all their income, which they got to pay now anyway, but it's less than the room and board, but they got to pay it all. Now, if they're in nursing home care, that's all they have to pay, and then the balance is picked up by TennCare. There isn't going to be a $900 shortfall every month,
right? Because
it's a different method of payment, and it covers it all. So,
wow,
it gets complicated, doesn't it? It gets to be a real numbers game.
It does. It's amazing though, all the avenues that can be taken. And I guess one thing I've learned from you is there's always seems to be at least some remedy to make a circumstance better than you may think it could be. I mean,
all these options, most all of them are available at any time. There's very few that can go away and not available anymore. There's a couple, but there are certain things. But most of the time, we can do something.
Yeah,
we can do something because the goal is trying to get approved. Once you're approved, then it's easy going then because certain things could change when you're approved, but there's ways to deal with that. Let's just say you get approved. When you get approved, your house or your primary residence is not considered in the calculation. And so if you get approved and after, you're living in a nursing home and you're no longer at your primary residence and it turns out that you have a family member that wants to buy it, right? You probably run into that.
Oh, yeah.
They buy it. Okay, well, what that does, it triggers something. Your primary residence is a special category. It's a countable asset, but it's an excluded countable asset. Now, that doesn't mean it changes from countable to non-countable. It just means they're not going to use it in the calculations to determine if you're eligible.
Right.
So if it's worth $200,000, if you can get a house worth $200,000, if it's worth $200,000, they're not going to say you got $200,000 of countable assets. They're going to exclude that.
Right.
from the equation.
Right.
And so the house, the primary residence, is excluded. Now, I don't like that term because sometimes people in the facilities say it's protected. It is not protected. It is excluded. There's a big difference between the two.
Yes.
Now, if it's the house is excluded, but if you sell it and get the $200,000 check, the funds are not excluded. You now have over-resourced yourself.
Yes.
Okay. Now you have put yourself in a position where you're going to get disqualified because you have these resources now. So, but there's things we can do about that.
Okay.
So when that happens, we like to structure the sale to happen at a time when we want it to, when we have time to deal with it. Because
Yes.
when you have to report any kind of changes in your financial circumstances within 10 days.
Yeah.
So if we're going to sell a house and suddenly come into this much money, then we're going to take this money and we're going to go purchase an annuity with it, and that takes a little bit of time to do. So we put everything in place that we can put in place first, especially when you're dealing with family members. We can say, okay, this sale is going to take place on the first of the month.
Yes.
Now we have the whole month to deal with it, right?
Right.
And we only have to report it within 10 days, but I mean, we got time to deal with this stuff. So we get everything all set up, then we make the exchange and the sale, and then we do what we do with the money. And now, the person will maintain their eligibility. We may have to deal with a penalty period for a certain length of time, but
Right.
we knew all that going into it. So that's that was kind of long-winded way to approach the difference
Well,
between assisted living and long-term care and nursing home care.
Of course, I've talked with you enough to know that and I think we may have covered this before, but it was interesting to go back through those three different levels of TennCare, and the qualifications for each, because that's just interesting. Because we normally just think of it's all one lump thing, and there's different avenues.
Yeah, I mean, there's like I said, there's different, and these things they call waiver programs are really odd and hard to understand. I spent a lot of time on them years ago to get them under my belt, but it's very difficult to explain. But if we just consider, if we just say something like assisted living, which is one of our waiver programs under the TennCare Act, asking the Federal Medicaid Act to be able to do this is kind of what a waiver program is. So it suffices to know that the eligibility requirements are the same, but how we pay is a little different.
Right. Interesting stuff.
Because the bottom line is we're asking the TennCare organization to pay the bill.
Yeah.
And the TennCare organization is bound by the Medicaid Act, which is the big bubble that we're one of 50 bubbles inside of.
Yeah.
Right. So we can do certain things, but we cannot exceed what the federal act says. We can be more. We can be less restrictive, but we can't be more.
So when you have of course, the circumstance that I had, when you have a family member who calls and says, I've got a parent or someone I'm caring for, they're going to have to go to assisted living or the nursing home, this, that, and the other. So I need to sell their house. And that's the way it comes to me.
All right.
And I'm like,
Me too.
So I'm like, well, so what questions do I need to ask here?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is a way.
Yeah.
I mean, you can certainly sell the house and use it to pay.
Yes.
When you're private paying, for most people, there is an end in sight. In other words, it's a finite source, or let's put it this way: there's only so much water in the well, right?
Right.
And it's going to run out at some point.
It's going to last so long.
I mean, depending on, if you're quite wealthy, I mean, if you're looking at pushing $120,000 a year to be in a facility,
right?
I mean, if you're wealthy enough to, or have the wherewithal to pay that for, I don't know, the average is 3.6 years, right? But if you're in there, for 5 years or something, if you got the wherewithal to pay that, that may be an option you choose.
Yes.
Because if your income exceeds the cost of care, then it's going to be hard to get you eligible because all your income goes to the cost of care. And if you make more than the cost of care is, it's going to be very difficult for us to plan to get you.
Right.
I mean, there's some planning we can do, but it's
so there's income, and in most cases, what we're talking about is usually Social Security or pension, income, and then there's assets.
Mm-hmm. Those are two different categories. One is income that comes and goes, and one is the stuff you own.
Yes.
Your bank account, your investment account, stocks, bonds,
your money,
your home, your real
property.
estate, all that stuff. Your cars, stuff, all the stuff you own, including the money in the bank, and that's where we spend most of our time in that category. Yes. Like I said, income's pretty easy to solve. So if somebody's over the income cap, no sweat. We know just what to do. It's the resources that give us the work we have to do.
Yeah.
And we got to modify them.
Yeah. Well, having learned and listened to you long enough, and of course, I highly recommend the seminar for anybody who hasn't done it to come in and listen to the seminars that you do. Got one coming tomorrow. here at the studios. But having listened to you, it's like, okay, well, I understand that you've got this circumstance, but have you thought about all this? Mm-hmm. And so it led into a great conversation that I had with someone. And I was like, look, you've got all these assets. They have some money in the bank. They have some money. They're private paying. They've got this house. You're thinking about selling this house. You may not have to do all that, depending on what these circumstances are, but you need to go through and get some questions answered.
I mean, knowledge is a superpower.
Yeah.
It just is. And if you're in that boat, you are navigating waters where you don't know if there's sharks in the water, and you don't know where they are, and you don't know how many there are. You are really flying blind.
Right.
So if you know that there's sharks and you know where they are, you can set yourself up accordingly.
Yeah.
So by all means, that's exactly what we talk about. But we don't get into that depth at the seminar. But we do talk about options that are available. And
well, I want to thank you because see, in the old days, I would have just said, okay, I'll sell your house, and I'd have made a commission and moved on.
Oh, I see where this is going.
But now I'm like, okay, they may not need to sell this house, and let's talk about it and let's see what we can do.
Well, really, you can still sell the house. We just need to protect the proceeds.
But protect the proceeds. That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to get it eat up with if it doesn't have to.
Which is going to lead right into my other topic about power of attorney, or I'm not going to talk about power of attorney. I'm going to talk about the effect of a power of attorney.
Yeah.
But it leads right into that. But before we do, I see we're a little bit past the halfway mark, so we haven't given the telephone number. So
not even the telephone.
Why don't you go ahead?
And we would love to take phone calls here, and we always have. 766-9393 is the number. Looks like one may be coming. 766-9393 is the number. If you would like to talk with Stan here this morning, or you got a question or a circumstance like I've described, then maybe you might want to kind of dive into.
And if you plan on coming to the seminar,
yes.
I encourage questions. I always do.
Yes.
If you have a question you want to come to the seminar, bring it with you, okay?
Yeah.
And if you develop questions during the presentation, which you will, write them down, because at the end of the seminar, we do a Q&A. And like I say, I stay there until the last question's answered. Sometimes I'm there till 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
I mean, by all means, take advantage of that. I'm willing to give the time and the answer and help you out with, we can't resolve issues, but we can talk about the things that you can do. And bring them with. And, of course, call in during the show. We always anticipate that, calls.
We'd love to have that.
Ask questions. So moving along into this concept of power of attorney. Now, I've talked about power of attorney before. And, of course, and most people listening know that that's when you give somebody else the authority to make decisions for you when you can't make them.
Yes.
And typically people like to make their own decisions when they can.
That's true.
But if an incapacity presents itself, you definitely want a loved one that will make them for you, that kind of has a good idea what you would do yourself, right?
Right.
And so that's the whole thing of power of attorney. So I'm not going to get into that, but I often get asked the question, if mom goes into the nursing home and she's incapacitated and I'm her agent for power of attorney, sometimes you'll see it called attorney in fact, but the agent. Can I set up one of these asset protection trusts you talk about? Because if you come to my seminar tomorrow, I'm going to talk about what's called an income-only asset protection trust, which I call, the ultimate secret in how not to go broke in long-term care, right?
Yes.
And it's a grand tool. But if you don't have one, okay, of course, if the person's competent and they want to do it, they can set it up for themselves, right? So I'm talking about a situation where somebody's already been deemed incompetent or incapacitated. In other words, we've got a medical decision that says this person should not be making their own legal decisions, right? Dementia's gotten too far. And so the agent is acting under a written power of attorney.
Yes.
And they call me and they say, hey, I've come to your seminar and I've heard you on the radio and you talk about this asset protection trust. If you put property into it, it keeps it out of the hands of the long-term care industry, which is exactly what it does.
Yeah.
And they say, my mom's in care, and I'm her power of attorney. Can I do that for her? Okay.
Yeah.
That's the point I want to make. And the answer to that is, and I hate this answer, but I'm going to have to give it, because I was in law school. I had a professor that I did not like. And he used this all the time. Okay. He used this all the time, and I hated it. Now I'm going to say it. He used to say, maybe yes, maybe no.
Maybe yes, maybe no.
And I thought, that's legal double talk, Okay, but the answer to this is maybe yes, maybe no. And here's the maybe part. And it's pretty simple. If the power of attorney that you have specifically has the language that says you can establish and fund revocable and or irrevocable trusts. If you have that language, yes, you can do it. If it is void, that language, you cannot.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And when I review powers of attorneys, and I'm telling you, I've reviewed a blue million of them, the vast majority, I'm going to say 95%, 98%, don't have that language. What some of the better ones have is language about trust, but if you look at it, almost always it refers to trust that already exist. So
Yes.
that my agent can accept and fund a revocable living trust that I've created during my lifetime. So they can kind of continue
Yeah.
the trust that you have, but
Right.
not establish the trust. Now, you may say, well, that's just your opinion, Stan, right? You may say, well, that's just your opinion. Well, it's not my opinion. And some time ago on this radio station and on several of the other ones,
Yes.
when we go over court cases,
Yeah.
there was a court case right here in Tennessee. It was our appellate court,
Yep.
which now becomes law, right?
Yeah.
Now, if it gets to the Supreme Court, it becomes law, but some things never get to the Supreme Court. And if they don't get to the Supreme Court, the highest court has established that. If nobody
Right.
wants to review it to the next court up, then that's what law is. And it was an exact case like that. There was other things going on that were really cool, but I won't. Maybe I'll bring that up another time. But there was exactly that. Had a mom in care. She had become incapacitated. Now, let me back up. If you're incapacitated and it doesn't have those words, how are you going to change them?
You can't.
You can't, because the only person who can give you the power is the principal, and the principal's
Right.
incapacitated. The only way you can get it is if you go to court and opt for a conservatorship and convince the court you need that power, and they would give it to you. But that is a long drawn out
It's a
process,
long drawn out,
and it's
yeah.
costly. Okay,
Yeah.
it's a conservatorship. It's conservatorship. People hear the word, but maybe not know what it really means. Good way to think of a conservatorship is a court-ordered power of attorney.
Yes.
Because the only person can act on somebody's behalf involuntarily is the court.
Yes.
So this person's incapacitated. They can't. You shouldn't be at a standstill where you can't do anything.
Right.
People can't get paid because the principal can't sign the check, but the principal never gave a power of attorney, so nobody else can do it. So what does everything come to a grinding halt? No.
Yeah.
The court gets involved and puts somebody in that place for them. So,
Yes.
but now they can't change it, right? So if it doesn't say those words, you can't. If it says those words, you can. Now, a court case came up here in Tennessee, and the mom was in the nursing home,
Yes.
and son thought it was a good idea to do exactly one of these trusts. Okay?
Yeah.
And that I talk about. And he did. Okay, well, later on, the whole court case was about she was challenging him, and she said what her challenge was, he didn't have the authority to create the trust in the first place.
Okay.
And the court was pretty simplistic about it, and they pretty much said, well, when when you present an issue to one of the appellate courts, they kind of start out by framing, here's the question before the court. Okay.
Yeah.
And they're very sneaky about how they do that.
Yes.
So there's this whole methodology. If you're going to go to court, you're going to get the right answer to your question. The problem is you better make sure you ask the right question.
Yes.
And that's tricky.
I would imagine.
If I said
so.
to you, and I don't want to get too derailed, but it's important. If I said to you, Jeff, you have a watch on, what would be the answer? And you would probably say, yeah, it's 8:44.
Yeah.
Well, the answer to that question is yes.
The answer is yes.
You suppose the question I really wanted to ask was, what time is it?
Yes.
Is there a light switch in this room?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, see, and so that's what the court does. They will answer the court, and they have to, because other than they're kind of exceeding their jurisdiction to answer questions that are not put to them.
Yes.
Okay. So the question that was put to them was, did he have the authority to create this asset
Right.
protection trust?
Right.
And the court said pretty much, if the power of attorney that he has says he can. And so
wow.
they go through it. Okay, and they find the clause that says exactly that. It says my agent can establish and fund revocable and irrevocable trusts, and the only qualifier was as long as doing so is in my best interest, which is like a qualifier all the time when you're
Yes.
dealing as somebody's
Yes.
power of attorney. And so what was amazing about that was, the court, that's pretty much what they went through a lot of stuff, and they said this and they said that, but basically they said, if the language is in the power of attorney, yes.
Yeah.
And that's one of our enhanced powers that if you don't say it, you don't give it. That's one of those powers that if you would have said, and if you see a power of attorney that's like a page and a half, which are ones that are out there a lot,
Yeah.
and it has language, I incorporate all the powers under our Durable Power of Attorney Act by reference, okay?
Yeah.
It doesn't bring that one in. Those are enhanced powers. They have to be expressed in the document. And that's what the court was saying. They're saying this is a power that if it's in the document, he has it. If it's not, this is how we're going to rule. If it says he can, he can.
Right.
If it says he can't or is silent on it, then he cannot.
Interesting.
And so when they find that, they went through it, okay, and they said he definitely has the power. However, there's another qualifier. It has to be in his best interest, okay, or her best interest. Now, here's the thing that caught my attention.
Okay.
He was trying to do one of these trusts we talk about all the time. We're going to talk about it at the seminar tomorrow, right? The Asset Protection Trust to protect property from long-term care, right?
Yeah.
And so the court analyzed that. Okay, so maybe you see where I'm going on this. The court looked over what he did because they were trying to answer the question that was imposed upon him by the power of attorney, which was acting in her best interest. And they went on to say this is an asset protection trust. It's an irrevocable trust that limits the access to the property, on and on and on. And its sole purpose is to make the property it's a creditor protection trust.
Yes.
It protects the assets from creditors, and the creditor they're worried about is the future creditor of long-term care. It goes through all this. And the bottom line, they finally said, we determined that making such a trust for somebody to protect their wealth from the high cost of long-term care is most certainly in the principal's best interest.
Yes. Yeah.
So how's that for? Not only
that's validation.
I mean, it's like, hey, if you do this, we now have one of our almost highest courts in the state of Tennessee saying, if somebody did that for you. That's definitely in your best interest to do that. So if it's definitely in your best interest for your agent to do it for you when you're incapacitated, is it not also in your best interest to do it now while you're not incapacitated and not have to go through all that? Yeah. Or at least, and I wouldn't even at least say in your power of attorney that somebody can do it for you. But why wait for them to do it for you? Do it now yourself, because we have these time periods that trigger when we do these things. And why wait until we're in a nursing home to create this trust and trigger certain time periods that we know we can't satisfy? So it is, if that's not the green light, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
I mean, I could argue that all day long.
Well, this begs a question I just kind of thought of, I guess. But when you've created an asset protection trust, and let's say you're a fairly younger person, and extended care is maybe a distance away, but you've gone ahead and got this prepared. You've done this anyway. What control do you have over those assets?
Well, it's a little less than you do when you don't have the trust, and that's what makes it work.
Yeah.
And maybe if I think I know where you're going, it's not as popular with people that are midlife, because they're not worried about long-term care. It's down the road,
right? And
the 5 years is like way down. It's like 5 years, it's down the road. There are some limitations to what we call access, not control. We still have control over everything, but we have limitations on our access.
Right.
And since they're like maybe in their first or second home, they know they're going to buy another home eventually and maybe another one after that, and they're still in their working career, climbing the corporate ladder or whatever they're doing.
Right.
It's, when we talk about that, it just doesn't seem to be of interest to people in their 30s and 40s.
Right.
Kind of like when they, people say things like, I'm just not worried about long-term care right now.
Right.
Like you said, it's not very foreseeable at the time. Okay?
Sure.
Just like I said when I was in my 30s or 40s.
Sure.
I said, I'm not worried about that just yet.
Sure.
I mean, it's so, I think.
Not only 30s or 40s, but 50s and 60s.
I mean, there's something that's expected of you when you have an asset protection trust. Now, my opinion is not much for what you get from it. From the protection you get, it's not much. And that's what I talk about at the seminar in a little more length, because I put it up on my PowerPoint. You can see it a little better.
Yeah.
But there are some restrictions to getting at it. But so if you say, listen, I want to protect my assets from long-term care, but I want complete access and complete control of everything. Well, I can't do that. I can't make that work. Got to give up this what we call access. Now, don't panic, because access has a definition and a meaning.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean you can never see it. It's gone forever. You can't use it. It doesn't mean that. And then there is a way to get access. It's just not called access at all. It's actually the exercise of a specific right you have when you make the asset protection trust, where you can get to the principle of the trust. Okay. You just have to do it a special way. And I talk about it's too hard to talk about on radio because I don't have a whiteboard, or you can see it. Well, maybe the people on Facebook could, because they can see us. But we don't have a whiteboard in here. But at the seminar, I have it on a PowerPoint, and we go through it. And it makes sense when you can make the visual.
Yeah.
And to me, it's about. In the scenario I just mentioned, meaning I want to have protection, but I want to have access and control of everything.
Sure.
That's having your cake and eat it too, and you can't.
Yeah.
But I can get you as close to having your cake and eat it too with the asset protection trust, and you'll see that it is still very palatable to most people. But what they have to do, especially in your later years, like you said, 50s and 60s,
Yes.
that's a good time to do it. And the reason I say that's a good time, there's no rule, right?
Right.
But if you're in your 60s,
Yeah.
let's just say you're in your 60s somewhere, and your thought process is this: well, I'm kind of winding down my working career.
Yeah.
I kind of have amassed my wealth working. I'm getting close. I'm thinking about retirement, or may already be there.
Right.
But I'm kind of getting close to retirement now. And you're also kind of thinking about the possibility of long-term care. You look around and you say, you know what, I'm in my 60s. I'm sure hope I don't go into long-term care when I'm in my 70s or whatever.
Right.
So you're giving this some thought. Okay. Now that's a good time to do this because of those very reasons. And we are straddled with this 5-year period that is government imposed.
Right.
That used to be 3. They changed it to 5. I'm telling you, as sure as I'm sitting here on the radio with you, they're going to change it again.
I would say so.
But so far, so good. Now, we're stuck with this time period. Now, if you're in your 60s and you're still healthy, right? I mean, if you do this trust at that point in time, the 5 years is like statistically in the bag. I mean, you can get hit by a bus and go into a coma, right? I mean, stuff happens, right?
Yeah.
That's possible. But statistically, the chances of clearing this 5 years is very, very high.
Yes.
And that's why we want to do it then, is because get this 5 years behind us.
Right.
While we're healthy. If we don't, the 5-year look-back rule begins the day you file your 10-care application, and you can't do that till you're in a facility.
Right.
So I propose to you, when you're in a facility and you invoke the 60-month look-back, those are not the best 5 years we want to be looking at.
Yes.
Because you very well probably have given stuff away because you're headed for the nursing home, and you would have had the same thought as everybody else, and it's like, well, if they're going to get everything I own, like the folks you talk to, if they're going to get everything I own, why can't I just give it away? And people do.
Yeah.
And that decision to give stuff away will haunt you.
Creates a
It
problem.
will haunt you for 60 months behind whenever you do that.
Yeah.
So let's say we talked about this. When you put property into an asset protection trust, it is a divestment. I mean, the trust is not paying you for it. And now that makes perfect sense because we would not have gained anything. If we put a $300,000 house into the trust and the trust paid us $300,000 for it, we've not changed our financial position one iota. We had a $300,000 asset going in. We have a $300,000 asset coming out. It just changed posture from the real estate to the money.
Yes.
So it's all exposed. So when we put a $300,000 house into an asset protection trust, it is considered a divestment. You gave it to the trust. That triggers our 5 years. Okay. Now let's get it behind us while we're healthy.
Yes.
Once we hit 60 months and a day, we are home free for that asset. It's forever protected.
Awesome.
And so, so you're thinking about, people in midlife, I get some, but for the most part that's not their concern. And I get it. I get the reasoning.
Yeah.
But you certainly could do it then.
Yeah. And I'm thinking in terms of, okay, you've got some accumulated funds and some accounts of some sort, money markets or whatever they are.
Yeah.
And let's say they're significant, but you use them, maybe to
buy your next house.
To buy a next house or buy an investment property, something like that.
Which is why we save it to use it, right?
Yes, it's able to use it. So if those funds are in some kind of an asset protection trust, is there still a way to utilize them if an opportunity comes and say, hey, I want to invest in that rental property or whatever?
Yeah, there is. There's a way to get at them. It's not access. It's not even indirect access because access we're not allowed to have.
Okay.
But when you make these kind of trusts, you have certain trust or retained rights.
Okay.
And one of them is the ability to distribute that out. You just have to distribute it in a certain way for you to be able to use it.
Okay.
And it's, it's relatively easy, relatively not too difficult, but it has to be done that way to maintain its creditor protection.
And so it stays in the box.
It can come out of the box and stay out of the box.
Okay.
But when it comes out of the box, it has to come out of the box a certain way.
Okay.
It has to come out by the exercise of this right.
All right.
It can't just come out and give it to somebody. It has to exercise that right. Now, when I say you have control, that's what you do with the assets in the box.
Yes.
So you got a $300,000 house in the box, right?
Yeah.
And you think, I want to sell it. We might head to Florida, but we want to sell our house.
Yeah.
It's in an irrevocable trust where I have no access to principal. Can I sell it? Answer, sure. Call Jeff Hood at Hood Company and Real Estate and say, hey, would you list this house for me? He'll say, sure. Finds you a buyer, sell it. What do you get when you sell a $300,000 house?
Well, you get your money.
It's not a trick question. You get a check for $300,000, right? If that $300,000 now goes into a bank account inside the trust, it has never left the trust. And as long as it's in the trust, it's always protected. If the check is written to you, the individual, it's exposed, okay? And now, I often say that if you have access, this is one of the things I ask you to memorize at the seminar. If you have access to an asset, so do your creditors. So we don't want to have access. But if the check is written to the buyer, he has access to it, and now it's exposed. But if it's written to the trust...
So in a technical way, I guess, the trust actually owns the house.
Well, it's your trust, but that's where ownership lies. That's right.
The ownership lies in the trust. So the payment would go to the trust.
But you have complete control over the assets in the trust, meaning if you want to sell it, sell it. Yeah. Now, if you want to take that $300,000 and buy a house in Florida, buy it.
Yeah.
Just take title to the new house in the trust. Would say you say, you know what, I think cannabis stocks are going to take off. I'm going to invest it in that. Or I'm going to give it to Edward Jones for a managed account. Or I'm going to put it in CDs. Or I'm going to buy gold. You can do all of that. If the asset stays in the trust, it's protected. Yes. So if you black box the trust and you say you got $500,000 in there, it doesn't matter if it changes posture from real estate to cash, back to real estate, back to cash, to gold, to cannabis stocks, to CDs. You can manipulate it all day long. But if the asset stays in the box, it's always protected.
See, this is just fun to learn. This is fun to learn. And you've got an opportunity tomorrow to learn a lot more. I do.
And I see we're getting close to the end.
That's right. That's right. You got an opportunity tomorrow to learn a lot more. And I would recommend that you call Stan's office, 363-7222.
That's right. And Pierchoski Estate Law, Pierchoski Elder Law. And tell the girls you want to come to the seminar so we have a head count.
Yeah,
and put up tables and chairs. Tomorrow, it's Saturday at the WLX radio station in the back of the building at those double doors toward the back of the parking lot at 10 o'clock. We try to start as close to 10 as I can. Yeah. And it'll be about an hour to an hour and 15 presentation, then wide open question and answer.
Yes.
For as long as I need to be there. So take advantage of that. I offer the time freely. Some of the naysayers say, but what's the catch? What do I have to sign? What am I to commit to? The answer is absolutely nothing.
No catch.
If you do all that and you say, you know what, I think this is not for me. I mean, we'll still be friends. I get it. If it's not for you, it's not for you. But at least you've made an informed decision to get there.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm there. I often say, I'm not going to have, when I have this presentation, I am not there to talk you into anything, and I'm not there to talk you out of anything.
Right.
You decide. That's what it's for. So
absolutely.
Looks like we're getting close. So give me a call. You can also go to my website, estateplanstand.com, and
that's right.
You can sign up that way if you want, or email me or call me from the phone. And ask any question anytime. You don't have to wait to a seminar to ask a question. Call me and we'll schedule a call.
This has been an interesting discussion today. I learned a lot today. This has been good. And then and just to review that the assets in the trust are usable.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Like it's your house, you can live there. Everything it's seamless to you if it's like your home.
Yeah, it's not like you're actually losing control.
You have control. You cut the grass.
In fact, you end up having better control long term.
That's right.
Which is what this is about.
Because now you'll have something to leave to the kids.
Yes.
Whereas if you don't do something, you may not have it to leave to the kids.
Absolutely.
So, anyway,
estate plan Stan Pierchoski. Pierchoski Law in Pulaski, Tennessee, on the square there in Pulaski, Tennessee. Not hard to find at all. You're right there by the Star Theater.
Yep.
That's on the east side of the square.
Southeast corner of the square.
Southeast corner of the square. And always a pleasure, always fun, always informative. Don't forget the seminar tomorrow starting here at 10 o'clock.
Correct. Always a pleasure.
All right. See you, buddy.
Kentucky, charged with reckless driving and more.
He's going to jail, and it ain't nothing you can do about it.
That's video shot by ESPN reporter Jeff